name is Cheun Jun. I'm a master's student at Seoul National University. As a research fellow, I will be presenting my poster on the nuclear proliferation stabilization application on North Korea. My research questions are as follows. Is North Korea more dangerous with nuclear weapons? Is nuclearized North Korea a bigger security threat to Republic of Korea? Or will it act as a normal state that will be deterred through rational negotiations? If you are interested, please check out my poster at the 2021 online NEREC conference on nuclear nonproliferation and my 5-minute promotion video.
For decades, North Korea's nuclear program has remained as a serious security threat that remains unresolved. On the other hand, China's role with its economic leverage has become more important when putting pressure on Pyongyang. In this study, China's behavior when cooperating with the international community when putting economic sanctions is carefully analyzed using game theory.
Hi everyone, I'm Yerim Hong, studying as a research fellow with NEREC and master's student majoring in international relations at Seoul National University. My research aims to examine the effects of U.S. security policies on support for domestic nuclear proliferation in South Korea. If you're interested in my research in detail, you can check out my 5-minute video. Thank you.
How do sanctions on DPRK work? In the case of secondary sanctions, international society imposed the sanctions on DPRK in order to achieve the non-proliferation of nuclear weapons. Furthermore, United States started secondary sanctions and aimed to supplement sanction program. However, previous sanctions could not secure effectiveness in terms of military and economic aspect. DPRK nuclear weapon inventory is estimated to increase continuously, and their ballistic missiles are ready to carry nuclear weapons. It is time to think another approach. Thank you.
Japan has been hit by its biggest earthquake since records began.
An explosion was heard and smoke seen at the power plant.
The images of destruction and flooding coming out of Japan are simply heartbreaking.
Deja vu.
What did you just say?
Deja vu. Nuclear deja vu.
What did you see?
What happened?
Switch, APOC.
What is it?
What are the challenges that will be faced in this verification?
How can we best utilize the opportunity?
What are the best techniques that can be used in this verification?
Hi everyone, my name is Minju Kim and I'm currently studying Masters in International Studies under Korea University. I'm also one of the graduate fellows of 2021 NEREC's Summer Fellows program. During this program, my policy paper is going to focus on how Biden administration and Republic of Korea should focus on human rights foreign affairs for denuclearizing North Korea.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Day 3 of NEREC 2021 conference. We truly appreciate your interest and support for the conference for the last 2 days. And today is our last day. We will be talking about nexus of technology and policy surrounding the development of new technology called small modular reactors. This is Man Sung-im, the director of NEREC and a professor of nuclear and quantum engineering at KAIST. Our keynote speaker for the session, Ambassador Laura Holgate, is unfortunately or fortunately not available for us. She has been just reappointed as an ambassador to Vienna by the Biden administration. She just sent me an email. This is a good news or bad news. I'm going to Vienna as we speak, and that means I'm not available for this special opening keynote for your session. So that's very unfortunate, but I think we really truly congratulate Ambassador Holgate for her new task or renewed task in Vienna in addressing many of the future challenges. That means we have some extra time for the session, so that's a good news. Especially, I think our opening presentation from IAEA, it covers extensive contents of SMR developments. So I will try to be a little more lenient in terms of controlling the time for the speakers. But given the opportunity, I want to say a few words before we start our session. As many of us know, when nuclear power was first introduced, so-called under the Atoms for Peace initiative, the technology was hailed as a hope for the future. Nuclear technology promised plentiful energy, prosperity, and even peace. Introducing nuclear power to a country. It involves a huge financial commitment. It demands for establishing and running administrative and regulatory institutions with strict safety requirements and strict standards for design, manufacturing, construction, operation, and maintenance. Nuclear technology requires highly qualified and specially trained manpower or human power. A small country cannot physically import nuclear technology, as a large size of nuclear unit cannot be compatible with the demand and variations of the electric needs of the system. Now, the focus of our session this morning, or this evening, or this afternoon, the SMR, is potentially a game changer. Emergence of SMR may change the picture of global nuclear power development in the future. It reduces the financial risk. It reduces the grid size requirement. It may mitigate concern over plant siting. It may even reduce manpower requirement. And according to what we heard on our first session from Anton, Mr. Anton Klokov, there are many countries out there who have never thought about having nuclear power, now thinking about introducing nuclear power. So now we may be talking about new wave of nuclear power development in the world. Although SMR does reduce some concerns or reduces the demand or requirement, still the need for high quality regulation control for safe and responsible use of the technology remains. As discussed in our session 1 of our conference on Tuesday or Monday for some of you, the aspiring nuclear power countries have lower governance characteristics, indicating some concern over safe and responsible use of nuclear power. There exists potential vulnerability to terrorism with these reactors. So this all indicates this new wave of nuclear power development in the world must be very carefully guided technically and politically with best preparations. And that is the purpose of our session this morning. In this session, we'll talk about the prospects of SMR development and implications. How does the innovative features of SMR really help addressing some of the concerns we talked about? So we have invited some of the best speakers on this topic, 6 speakers, and we'll be listening to them and sharing our insights and having some discussions. So without any further ado, let me introduce our first speaker. Our first speaker comes from IEA. I think it is right now 3 a.m. I'm not sure, 2 a.m. in Vienna. But we truly appreciate Mr. Hadid Subki for joining us from IAEA. Dr. Subki is a senior nuclear engineer with IAEA. He is a technical lead for small modular reactor technology development at IAEA. He joined the section in May 2010 as the project officer for SMR technology development. Dr. Subki has 30 years of working experience in advanced nuclear reactor design, technology development, nuclear safety, and licensing. He had worked for 17 years with 2 nuclear industry, General Electric Nuclear Energy in San Jose, California, and with Mitsubishi Heavy Industry in Kobe, Japan, prior to joining IAEA. He initiated his career with Bataan 1991 as a reactor engineer at the Bandung's Trigger Mark II Research Reactor Center. He holds a Doctor of Engineering degree in nuclear engineering from Tokyo Institute of Technology. He has authored dozens of technical reports and journal papers, including 15 IAEA publications on SMR. Let's welcome Dr. Subki for the first presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. It is really an honor for me to be here among the distinguished experts on small modular reactors as well as on the non-proliferations aspects of nuclear power. Let me share directly my presentation without further ado. Would you please confirm, am I sharing my presentation well?
Yes, we can see it very well and hear you very well. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much, Chairman. I need to save my bandwidth. because I'm operating at home, not from office, I would like to stop my video, but I will turn on my video again when in the discussions session. All right. As invited by the organizer, my name is Hadid Subki. I'm the technical lead for small modular technology development with the Nuclear Power Technology Development Section, the IEA Department of Nuclear Energy. It is an honor for me to be here among you. And then there are two speakers from the IEA, myself and my colleague, Dr. Brian Boyer. I think he already spoke on Monday. So I'm presenting on the advances in small modular reactor technology development, status and implication for sustainable deployment. I'm going to provide kind of a quick overview on the current status of the design and technology development on small modular reactor, and also provided some brief discussions on the safeguard by designs and then security aspect of SMR that could lead to our discussion on the proliferation resistance of SMR. In fact, my first work at the IEA back in 2010 to 2012 was on the addressing the enhancing proliferation resistant characteristic of small modular reactors. All right. So first, let the agree with the definitions of what we are using here for SMR. The SMR, what it means here, advanced reactors that produce typically up to 300 megawatt electric, whose systems, structures, and components can be built in factories and transported as modules to a site for installation as demand rises. So there are several key developmental propositions on why countries would like to have the so-called small modular reactors. Of course, the countries, particularly embarking countries, would like to have the option with better affordability. It means then the better economic performance in point of view, the lower upfront capital cost, and then the economic of serial production. The second, shorter construction time through modularization, through multiple modules deployment or modular construction. The third, countries also expect to have the nuclear technology option with the wider range of users through flexible operation option that to provide the power supply for remote region, the small grid, as well as for non-electric application for generation of electricity and industrial process heat, like seawater desalination, and also hydrogen production. The next one is site flexibility. Site flexibility can be obtained through the because the SMR have the small power, small core, and smaller source term in the case of the operation, and then the postulated accident. So it leads to the expectation of reduced emergency planning zone because it has the smaller footprint. Reduce carbon dioxide production, replacement for aging fossil power plant, for aging fossil fired plants, and also the current framework on the potential, I would say, an option to enhance energy supply security using hybrid energy systems by integrating renewables and nuclear in this regard using SMRs. In the past few years also, several countries, particularly the United States, Canada, Russia, United Kingdom, developing what's so-called micro reactors or very small modular reactors with the thermal power up to 20 megawatt thermal. Depending on the technology, they are up to 10 to 12 megawatt electric. Is the technology a subcategory within SMR to serve niche market, further niche market. For example, to replace diesel generators in small island, remote regions, or in hybrid use with micro renewables. So I heard from the chairman regarding the small modular reactor as a game changer. So it happened that I have the I prepared one slide that indicate that SMR can be a game changer soon in the next 10 years. Also, we have the developmental objective, as I mentioned earlier, with small power, with the design simplifications, deployed with high modularity of system component structures. We get the cost benefit aspect, like lower upfront capital costs and risk, and then deployed in multiple module environment and with flexibility, and in various application for non-analytic application, including hydrogen production. Of course, they have also salient features comparing to like NPPs, and then to some embarking countries, in developing countries, it is also introduced as a value proposition for enhancing social acceptance by public. So the top tier generic user requirement and criteria of SMR would be its plant size. They are small, lower than 300 megawatt electric, and then design simplification. There are many design. Design standardization is required or pursued. Manufacturability by modularity, transportability. So the component must be small enough to be transportable by the standard transportable means. Safety, safeguard, security, and sustainable by design. And availability, proliferation resistant, economic competitiveness, and capability to be in synergistic with renewables. So there are several ways in categorizing SMR technologies. The approach that we have taken here with the advice from our international technical working group for small modular reactors, we come up with the 6 category. The first one is the land-based water-cooled SMRs. There are, I think, about 26 design of them. The second category is called marine-based water-cooled reactors, although not all marine-based SMR are water-cooled. I think there are about 10 design and of marine-based SMRs, including floating nuclear power plant, and liquid-cooled reactors with fast neutron spectrum, high-temperature gas-cooled reactors, molten salt reactors, and finally micro reactors that can be from the previous 5 mentioned category. So until 2020, so I developed, I think, biannually a booklet called Booklet for Advanced Reactor Information System. So in 2020, globally, we have about 70 to 75 design, quite overwhelming number. 75 design from different stages of development and deployment maturity. So there are at least 37 countries, I think, and involved in the technology development of SMRs, and from almost 50 technology developers across the 5 continents. So let me explain this simple chart, but it could explain in general quite well on what is the first 10-year deployment horizon of SMR. We have 3 forerunners. The first one is already in operation. You can see here, you can see in the left top corner, it's the design called KLT-40S. It's already deployed as in a floating nuclear power plant called Academic Lomonosov in the northeast part of Russia. So it connected to the grid in December 2019. and it was launched for commercial operation, I think, in May 2020. So it's already in operation for more than a year, producing 70 megawatt electric from 2 reactor unit in a shift, unpropelled, connected to barge and to produce electricity and heat. The second one is the middle figure there. It's called HTRPM, high temperature gas cooled reactor pebble bed modules in China, that is now conducting the final stage of hot test commissioning, and then we'll start operation I think toward the end of this year and connected to the grid. And the third one, it will be the first integral PWR type SMRs that now is finalizing construction in Argentina in the Atuchatu unit site. So it will be in operation hopefully by 2023. So in this chart, you can see that the planned connection to the grid compared to the output capacity. So the locations, vertical locations indicating the power level, and then in the x-axis here is in the when it is deployed. You can see that until 2025, we will only see these 3 reactors in operation in Russia, in China, in Argentina. However, before 2025, we will have 3 reactor design called Brest-OD 300, SCP-100, and Rhythm 200 started construction. So this SCP-100 will start construction this year in China. So these 3 reactors by 2028 will also connected to the grid. So toward the end of 2030, there are dozens of SMR that I will not mention one by one that plan to be deployed. For example, including the design called NuScale. NuScale is the integral PWR reactor design with matriculation from United States. It obtained their standard design approval from the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commissions last year in September. So they are now preparing for the rule making for construction. It will be deployed in the site in Idaho Falls to be operated by the utility consortium called UAMS, Utah Associated Municipal Power System, to produce their first 2 modules or first modules of 150 megawatt electric or 77 megawatt electric from 1 module by the end of 2028. And then we have here in the yellow box, there are at least 4 reactor design of categorizing as micro modular reactors. They will be deployed in Canada, for example, this reactor called MMR or micro modular reactors. This is one of the design that will be deployed in Canada, Chalk River Laboratory in Ontario to produce about 5 to 10 megawatt electric So we will call this 10 years from now, 2020 to 2030 is the first 10-year deployment time frame. So commercialization in the large number will take place only beyond 2030. Realistically, at least that's what we can have the best estimate comparing between what are being reported and claimed by member states as their plan and then the reality that we have now in the world on how they are progressing. Functional option of SMRs, they are, first of all, they are all viable options to contribute to climate change mitigations, depending on how many units they will be deployed in the next 20 years. But they are not only to produce electricity, but also they are processing. They are also used to produce process heat, industrial process heat, as well as the hydrogen production, replacing aging fossil plants, integrating with renewables in remote region. So in this regard, I would like to learn a lot from the expert of safeguard and non-proliferations in this conference on how would be the implication of SMR technology characteristic to proliferation resistance and safeguardability of their deployment. These are the samples of water-cooled theater SMR design. I already mentioned Karem that will be connected to the grid in a year or two in Argentina. SCP-100 in China that will start construction this year. In 2019 to the IEA, we got introduction of 3 design called New World, BWR X300, as well as Smart that is developed, that already the design from Korea Atomic Energy Research Institute that would already obtain the standard design approval back in 2012. But in 2016, the Saudi Arabia King Abdullah City of Atomic and Renewable Energy acquired the design. So they are developing the design with KAIRI, the joint consortium, the joint ownership of Saudi Arabia and Korea that have developed. They have completed what's called the pre-project engineering design of Smart for Saudi Arabia until 2018, and they are now performing the design modification to shoot the applicability for Saudi Arabian side and new scale that already explained. The marine-based SMRs, there are at least 10 design, including 2 reactor design newly introduced last year from, I think from KEPCO, it's called Bendy 60, to be deployed in the ship and propelled, and then the design called OFNP, a consortium of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology with the Japan TEPCO. So this is only show 4 of them. KLT-40S that already deployed, Rhythm 200 that will be built, SCPR-50S is the design from the CGNPC China that will be constructed in the next few years to power oil platform, and Shelf from Russia, from Nikiet, is a design with only 6 megawatt electric, deployed is about in offshore and onshore, and could be immersible or could be land-based, depending on the need. But this is the reactor that will be deployed in remote regions or the off-grid regions. Some of them deployed could be unmanned or with the limited, with the innovative ways of the operating the reactors. Fuels, on the fuels aspect, that depending on the reactor design, but they are all using the lowly enriched uranium, of course, with the enrichment lower than 5%. But several design, including particularly for marine-based SMR, they are pushed to the limit of until 19.75% of enrichment. Some of them using the new approach of highly assayed, highly assayed, high assay, lowly enriched uranium. But most of them are the design with the typical lower than 5% enrichment, particularly the water-cooled reactor-based SMRs. For high-temperature gas-cooled reactor SMRs, and then they are using the higher enrichment, about 9%, including the one in China. And then Japan just announced a week ago, Japan Atomic Energy Agency, that they are started to operate again the HCTR-30, the high temperature test reactor that they have operated about 15 years ago. So they are using to test the viability of the future GTSTR-300 design that now still under design development to be deployed in the next 10 years also when things are viable in the country. Emerging microreactors. Several countries are developing microreactor technology for potential deployment by 2030, including in Canada, Russian Federation, United States. There are 2 designs, and in fact, the US NRC is now conducting pre-licensing engagement with the Aurora, the design called Aurora from Oklo company. So generating up to 10 megawatt electric. So depending on the design, they are producing, the reactor producing about 20 megawatt thermal. So to supply power for remote region with mining operation, island communities in Southeast Asia, oil platform, and maritime shipping. So the deployment opportunities is in remote areas in North America, in Middle East, Africa, and the South East Asian archipelago. I'm presenting this slide essentially to trigger our discussion on what would be the implication for the non-proliferation regime. So the key attribute I think I have to mention already, they are not only there will be built for the 40 to 60-year design life, but also some microreactors, they are simply built to operate only for 10 to 20 years only. So without online refueling. So they are shipped to the ground, operate for 10 years, and then stopped, and then will be brought back to the host countries for refueling and so forth. So the first commercial availability of SMRs is about 2026. It will be either in Canada or in Russian Federation. Yeah, this is an example from the booklet that we produced last year. There are 6 microreactor design from different countries. This is the power range of microreactors. So I would like to mention only what are the potential issues and key challenges. Safeguard. So all the microreactors are factory sealed, contain factory sealed cores. With the new configurations of the system component structures, as well as the plan layout arrangement, in regard to the security, they are deployed for remote off-grid areas, could be attractive theft target because of new fuels with the higher enrichment. In this regard, the strategies for waste treatment and disposal can also be unique. There must be a new stream of waste, and then the operator requirement on oversight could also be different. So the inspectability of the reactor would have different requirements. So this will be something that I also would like to discuss and learn from the non-proliferation expert participating in this conference. The issues and action for SMR and microreactors. First, in the next 10 years, we need to demonstrate of their safety and operation performance for the first-of-a-kind technology, novel design and technologies. Beyond 2030, whether we will see the continuity of orders, and then to prove the cost competitiveness against alternative, whether or not this dozen of SMR vendor could secure robust supply chain with the viable financing option for embarking countries, regulatory frameworks. There are overwhelming number of design, and then licensing pathways should be determined, whether the global deployment possible and need harmonization. And of course, embarking countries, they need to develop their nuclear infrastructures of their national infrastructure for nuclear power. On cost and standard, I will skip this because time is limited time, but in principle that SMR development should increasingly apply code and standard, particularly to address the advanced manufacturing technique, to realize the higher degree of modularity, to come up with a shorter construction schedule, and then other deployability factors. Safeguard consideration of SMR. So I'm not the subject matter expert, but we are working with the expert in this regard. So this is with the presentation in my meeting from Dr. Jeremy Whitlock, the section head from the Safeguard department. Many SMR have new fuels, either with the containing thorium or the U-233, reprocessed uranium with MOX fuel, and transuranic uranium fuel. And then there are dozens of new reactor design. There are molten salt reactor, fast reactor, liquid metal cooled fast reactor, pebble bed reactors with new fuel cycles, including higher enrichment, not only to between less than 5%, but also pushed to the limit until about 19.75%. Some design adopt pyroprocessing and other new innovative process, longer operation cycles, not only less than 2 years, but also up to 5 to 10 years of operation, longer operation cycles, new supply arrangement. So there are new storage configuration as was formed. So in this regard, that there will be new spent fuel management and diverse operational roles. So they are deployed in remote region. They are producing district heating in the off-grid region, seawater desalination with hydrogen electricity. So the IEA might have to have the IEA verification capabilities must be ready in the operating countries. So other safeguard consideration of microreactors, including the remote regions, remote location, distributed network with low unit power. Yes, sir.
If you can finish in a minute, that will be appreciated.
Yes, sure. I will do that. Thank you very much. I'm sorry about it. So the high access reactivity for long life and safeguard by design in this regard will be very much important. So I would like to mention just only the benefit of safeguard by design is to reduce power burden of the operator by optimizing inspection. And then also we can reduce risk to scope, schedule, budget, and licensing when operating reactor design. So I'm jumping to the some challenges of remote operations, including the operational data that may need to be supplied continuously to offsite. So there are kind of the aspect of confidentiality of information that risk for the to be obtained by intruders and so forth, so on. So come up with the summary. I would like to sum up that the SMR is an attractive option to enhance energy supply security both in embarking countries as well as expanding countries. We have introduced safeguard by design that it will be important, that will benefit all parties, not just the IEA. And then the SMR and microreactors also will be deployed in new ways with remote autonomous operation and mobile operation. It provides some risk of security aspect. And then in this regard, with the final conclusion, the IEA is working to assist member states in all aspects of deployment, including engineering, infrastructure, technology assessment, safety, security, safeguard, and economics. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Dr. Suki, for your very comprehensive coverage of SMR development. That really sets the tone for our discussion in this session. So truly, truly appreciate your effort. I will introduce our next speaker, Professor Yong-hee Kim. He is a professor of KAIST in nuclear and quantum engineering. He is currently leading multi-university national consortium for the development of SMR called ATOM, Autonomous, Transportable, On-Demand, and Modular. Dr. Yong-hee Kim, he is an expert in advanced reactor design and nuclear reactor physics analysis. One of his major research area is also transmutation of nuclear waste, such as transuranics and long-lived fission product in advanced nuclear reactor system. He's also currently working on a very interesting concept of using laser Compton scattering photons for transmutation, photon-induced transmutation of nuclear waste. He served as a senior researcher at Korea Electric Power Research Institute and also principal researcher at KERI, Korea Atomic Energy Research Institute, and visiting scientist at Argonne National Lab, and associate professor at Ulsan National Institute of Science and Technology. He has extensive research and management experiences in the area of advanced reactors and reactor physics. He served as a member of the advisory committee for Korean Nuclear Safety and Security Commission. He is also serving as a returning member of that committee. I think Professor Yong-hee Kim is going to talk about the innovative features of SMR and what does that mean. Let's welcome Professor Yong-hee Kim.
Thank you, Professor Mansang-nim. It was a too long introduction, I see. Let me try to share my screen. So can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, let me make it full screen.
And from now on, I will try to control the time. So each speaker presenter has 15 minutes. Thank you.
Okay. So again, looks the former speaker, Dr. Hadi Subuki, he made a very good overview about the SMRs or small modular reactors, R&D activities in all countries globally. So I will try to touch on some details of the technologies, right, including our activities and some others. So this is the contents I have for my presentation today. So I will again briefly discuss the motivations for the SMR R&Ds and developments. And then I will introduce a few near-term SMRs, which are largely PWR or water-based small modular reactors. And then I will show you some futuristic, small, but not only small, actually some medium-sized advanced reactor technologies as well. So before we discuss the SMR, let me talk about the challenges and opportunities globally in the nuclear industry. So this slide shows the impact of the combination of carbon-free nuclear with another carbon-free renewables in combating the climate change to achieve global decarbonization. So as we fully aware, the nuclear is almost carbon-free, and the renewable is also very much carbon-free. But the cost is very much different depending on situations, particularly when you try to achieve quite low cost of this decarbonization. It's very clear from this study, we have to combine the two technologies, the two clean carbon-free technologies. Otherwise, if we rely on too much on the intermittent renewables, the cost will be probably too high because of the big necessity of the batteries or electricity storage. That is very much costly technologies. So here comes one big question about the nuclear. So the nuclear is very much flexible in harmonizing with the intermittent renewables. This is quite big question for the conventional, commercial nuclear power plant, because people say, and we understand, in many countries, the nuclear is sort of rigid energy source, because it's not easy to do the load follow operation very effectively. But we have a very good answer for this. For example, in France, there the nuclear electricity share is over 70%, and they do 24, 7 hours and 7 days load follow operations, including the frequency control. So the answer is yes and also no. Actually, personally, I think we have to improve the load follow capability for the future of the nuclear industry. So this is the SMR. Again, Dr. Subuki, he mentioned the concept and the many ongoing SMR activities. So let me just mention my own perspectives. So we say the SMR is to be smaller than 300 megawatt electricity, and the designs are modularized to minimize the construction cost. And there are, again, over 70 SMRs, including LWR, BWRs, and even Generation 4 technologies. And many people expect this kind of SMRs will be deployed in late 2020s, although some of the some view some conventional SMRs already in service. For example, as Dr. Suzuki mentions, the floating nuclear power plant in Russia. By the way, the big difference of the SMR is, first we see the size. So it's almost 1/10, even smaller than 1/10 of the conventional big LWRs. So this is the this picture shows the one of the example of the SMR, the NuScale. So, and I'm not going to discuss this because Dr. Suzuki already mentioned. So there are over 70 SMR development and researches globally. And here I am discussing the motivations for the SMR development. So let me just briefly mention the biggest motivation of the SMR, I believe, is the unparalleled safety compared with the conventional commercial NWRs. Again, it's achieving extremely high level of passive safety, not active safety. So we may say the core damage frequency can be negligibly, small or almost zero. And another motivation, this is a potential motivation. The SMR can be potentially quite, economical, because even though there is no economy of scale, we may achieve economy of multitude, because many modules which are factory fabricated should be deployed. And another very important one is the economy of automation is another crucial factor in improving the economy of SMR. Because of the smaller size, we have to minimize the size of the operating personnel. So automation or possibly autonomous operation of SMR will be, I think, necessary condition for affordable SMRs. And one way to improve the economy of the SMR is to shorten the construction period. And people are targeting less than 2 years. And that way, the capital cost and construction cost, I believe, can be quite smaller than the conventional one. And also, by using multi-modules in a single site, the SMR plant can be medium size or even big size one. So that way, a portfolio of the SMRs can be also very flexible. And the unparalleled safety, I believe, will reduce the indirect cost of the SMRs. So now let me go over a few near-term SMRs. Again, they are largely water-cooled SMRs. The first one is the NuScale SMR. Well, I believe all of you heard about this NuScale company, and the reactor module is also called NuScale. So the power is 77 megawatt electricity, and that is, again, PWR, the water cooled. And then the biggest feature of the NuScale SMR is naturally cooled. So the coolant is naturally circulate using the buoyancy force. And the CDF, the core damage frequency, is almost zero. It's an order of 10 to the -9. And in the standard design, they say 12 modules will be used in a single site, so producing almost a gigawatt electricity. So that way, it can compete with the conventional big size PWRs. And I think they tried to build the first NuScale plant in Idaho by 2029. And let me mention again, the extremely high level of safety can be achieved due to the submersion of the modules. So as you see here, the modules, all the modules of the NuScale, they are placed actually underwater operation of the NuScale modules. And now from here, I will show you a few concepts of the cost autonomous soluble boron-free SMR. At KAIST, we are working on the autonomous SMR from 2016. And the main goal of this activities is to develop key technologies for autonomous SMR. And the SMR is coined ATOM, Autonomous Transportable On-Demand Reactor Module. Its power is about 450 megawatt thermal, and in electricity, it will be about 145 megawatts. And one unique feature of this atom is soluble boron-free. So we completely remove the soluble boron-free and enhancing the safety and also possibly the autonomous operation of this SMR will be feasible. And the passive safety should be comparable to the other advanced SMRs, such as NEREC. And one of the unique features of the atom is, again, it's supposed to be autonomous without any interruption of the human operators. So we are working on the artificial intelligence system for the atom, which is named Gaia, so genuinely autonomous intelligence for the atom. Obviously, this one should be based on the advanced neural network technologies and big data technologies. So here you see the multiple functions of the Gaia system. The most important role of the Gaia is to control, but also it should be able to monitor and diagnosis, and also in case of the emergency, it should be able to mitigate the consequence of the emergency situations. So here, I'm just going to show you the autonomous operation, autonomous load follow capability of the atom system. It can do both daily load follow operation and also secondary frequency control. So as you see here, in the case of daily load follow operation, see the demand is changing quite slowly. And the reactor power follows the demand power almost perfectly. And this is done without any active reactor control. So we call this passively autonomous. Again, there is no reactivity control or control load movements in the middle of load follow operation. Similarly, the frequency control can be also achieved without any active control, almost the perfect frequency and daily load follow operation in a passive autonomous mode. And another very interesting way to do the load follow operation in the advanced SMR is to produce hydrogen gas when there is surplus electricity. For example, here when the electricity demand is lower than the 100%, then using the surplus electricity, we can produce hydrogen, which is very valuable products in coming future. So that way, the reactor will run at 100 capacity, but the load follow operation can be achieved very nicely. And fortunately, the hydrogen production cost is very much competitive. As you see here, using the high temperature steam electrolysis technology, which is already available in many applications. And as Dr. Already mentioned in the first presentation, we have also floating small modular reactors. And we have already one system in service developed in Russia, here you see. And another one is going to be deployed quite soon in China. It looks like they are not fully integrated, so-called block type water-cooled SMRs. And now I will show you a few futuristic advanced small medium-sized reactors. Not always small. Sometimes the system will be medium-sized. The first one is the natrium from the TerraPower, founded by Bill Gates. So in TerraPower, as many people recognize, they are developing advanced sodium-cooled fast reactors, sometimes named traveling wave reactor, and sometimes standing wave reactor. I have to tell you that in the current Natrium, they are using so-called standing wave reactors, which is, again, advanced sodium-cooled fast reactors utilizing high assay, low enriched uranium with depleted uraniums. And as is well understood by many people, the inherent safety is wonderfully good, and the thermal efficiency of the SFR is much higher than those of the PWR and BWRs. And the power output is about 345, and the maximum will be 500 megawatt electricity. One of the unique features of the Natrium system is to combine the SFR with a molten salt thermal energy storage. So that way they simplify the nuclear island a lot and reduce the capital cost of the system, and they can do extremely flexible load follow operations because of the molten salt thermal energy storage. So when the electricity price is high, they discharge, they sell the electricity. But when the electricity cost is, price is low, they don't discharge. They just, save the thermal energy in the molten salt. So that way, they can do very nice, load follow operation complementing the intermittent renewable energy resources. And another coming innovative reactor type is the molten salt and largely small size. One of the biggest motivation of the MSR is this potential. So some people and some developers, they say there cannot be any chance of severe accident in the MSR because the fuel is already leaking and the melting temperature is relatively high, like 400 degrees C. And because of the ionic bonding of the constant materials, and they cannot be, they cannot release the cesium and iodine, which is the most topic fission products. And also, there cannot be any spent fuels because, again, they can do the online treatments for removal of the fission product, and if necessary, they can feed the fresh fuel online. So there's no accumulation of the spent fuels. But obviously, this picture will indicate, okay, there can be some concern about the proliferation or safeguards. And another motivation of this molten salt reactor is that the passive load follow operation is extremely or naturally easy because of the very strong negative temperature coefficient of this SMR. And so there are over 20 startups globally developing this quite innovative and attractive MSR technologies.
Professor Kim,
but I have to mention this
quickly.
Yes, there are, the MSR was actually demonstrated in 1960s, but nowadays people are developing very much innovative fast spectrum MSRs, including European studies and TerraPower. TerraPower is also developing another innovative MSR. And Mortex, and also here in Korea, we are also developing advanced and innovative MSRs. And the micro-size MSRs or SMRs, actually, this was already mentioned. So let me summarize my talk with this small comment on security, safeguard, and non-proliferations. So when it comes to the SMRs, there are some concerns regarding the security challenges in dealing with many distributed SMRs. Can we deal, with distributed SMRs? And also regarding the floating SMR or nuclear power plants, I think we have to think about the global acceptability of security and safeguard of such reactor systems. Also, the higher say LEU may impose some concern about the proliferation issue. And for the liquid fuel MSRs, the material assessment and safeguard will be quite challenging issue, I believe. So with this, let me stop. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Kim, again for very comprehensive coverage of SMR designs and innovative features. So we'll revisit those issues along with our policy implications. So our next speaker I will introduce is Mr. Jonas Siegel. Jonas Siegel is a non-proliferation policy specialist at Argonne National Laboratory in the Division of Strategic Security Science. And he supports nuclear safeguard and nuclear non-proliferation policy studies and engagement. He served previously as the editor of the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientist. He was an associate director of the University of Maryland's Center for International and Security Studies. And he's basically looking at various nexus technology and policy nexus issues surrounding the use of nuclear technology. Mr. Siegel has a BA and a MA, MS from University of Illinois and currently completing his PhD in policy studies at University of Maryland. Mr. Siegel, welcome to our conference. Let's welcome our speaker. Thank you. I think you are muted. Please turn on your microphone.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here. And thank you, Professor Mansell.
Very good to see you again.
For welcoming me. It's been a few years since I've visited in Daejeon, and it was lovely to be there when I was there, and it's lovely to be back again. I was pleased the last time I was in Daejeon, I had the chance to participate in a NEREC meeting as well, and so it's lovely to be back and seeing you and your colleagues again. Before I have some very brief remarks, I do want to quickly say, though, that I am here today in my personal capacity, although I work at Argonne National Laboratory now. None of the views that I present today represent the views of Argonne National Laboratory or the Department of Energy and the U.S. government. I'm here just as an individual citizen. I was listening to the previous presentations very closely, and it's good to see that the broad range of SMR technologies, not only the light water reactor technologies, but the other advanced reactor types are continuing to be pursued and furthered around the world. I've been looking at the issue of SMRs and their impact, particularly on proliferation, for a number of years now. And we finally have a little bit of data to look at as we try to really imagine whether SMRs fulfill the promises that they've held for some time. One of the big promises, as has been mentioned earlier by the two previous speakers, is on the economics of reactor deployment. The other one that I'll address today is the proliferation resistance or the proliferation advantage of some of these new reactor systems. Unfortunately, the pace of SMR development over the last 10 years and the pace of deployment has been considerably slower than most governments and commercial enterprises have anticipated. As the pace of development, SMR development in general, particularly in the United States, has been slower than anticipated, the per kilowatt capacity cost for reactors under development has increased over time, affecting one of the main perceived advantages of SMR reactors. And to demonstrate this, I will refer to some recent work by my colleague Jeffrey Rothwell, who notes that the U.S. Energy Information Administration assumes an overnight construction cost of a 600 megawatt NuScale 12-pack reactor at around 6,600 kilowatt hours electric. And this entails a 6-year manufacturing construction lead time at a 5% capital cost. We're looking at the total installation costs of about 7,600 kilowatt dollars per kilowatt electric, which is really comparable to the amount of the cost for larger scale LWRs that have been recently developed and built by the United States. Still considerably more expensive than the larger scale reactors being built in China, in Korea, but considerably more expensive than I think was anticipated even 5 years ago. Unfortunately, the cost competitiveness of US SMR designs, as well as other SMR designs, will really depend on the nth of kind costs for those reactors being competitive with other low carbon emission energy technologies. The first of kinds costs, however, for these technologies may be too large to even get to the nth of a kind costs, right? Even if we perceive or anticipate reductions in cost from technological learning, we may not get there because the first of a kind costs may be too large per kilowatt electric to get there. So this is a considerable obstacle that SMR development has to confront because the cost competitiveness of SMRs on a kilowatt basis was anticipated to be considerably less or more affordable than the larger designs. So this is one of the kind of the cautionary notes that I present here about the economics of SMR development. The other point that I wanted to make, and this is a kind of still an open question, but whether the SMR and advanced reactor designs being explored still hold the potential to increase the proliferation resistance of new reactor systems. And as my colleagues will undoubtedly know, this type of improvement could occur in two ways. With intrinsic barriers, right, reducing the frequency of access or production of nuclear materials in a reactor and associated fuel cycle systems, or through extrinsic barriers, easing the process of safeguarding and securing the reactors and their associated fuel cycle systems. Now, although many of the SMR designs being pursued today and that were talked about earlier are anticipated to present some advantages in both intrinsic and extrinsic features. As researchers like myself and others in the United States and around the world have looked more closely at some of these SMR designs, we've begun to notice some trade-offs that are inherent that could work against each other in assessing the proliferation resistance of these new systems. So for instance, efforts to increase the security and proliferation of some of these systems by limiting access to a nuclear core, right, either by using a factory sealed core or having a long-lived core, could make it more difficult to conduct safeguards material accountancy measurements, right? And so a measure that was anticipated to provide greater security could actually make it more difficult to ensure the non-diversion of the materials in use. Also, safeguards officials could rely on more containment and surveillance technologies, right, and approaches in these instances to ensure continuity of knowledge of the materials. But these continuity of or containment and surveillance technologies tend to be underdeveloped at present and are unlikely to be sufficient to ensure the continuity of knowledge of materials in novel reactor designs with extended life cycles. And the US NRC in particular has expressed a preference for more traditional material control and accounting measures, even for some of these long-lived cores, over some of the continuity of knowledge approaches that have been suggested. Another potential trade-off is that increasing the length of a reactor's fuel life cycle could reduce opportunities for diversion, but these reactor designs could require higher enriched fuel, as Professor Kim noted, which has higher material attractiveness and introduces other non-proliferation challenges, namely the increased demand for separative work units at enrichment facilities and transit security considerations as well. So in sum, there's a need to really discuss the impact of novel reactors and fuel designs on required fuel cycle capabilities and the safeguarding and securing of those facilities and in-transit materials. These are really open questions that continue to deserve additional attention. These are just some of the questions that, again, remain open about SMR designs, those that are discussed, and some of the advanced designs that use non-light water reactor technologies. So, as promising as these technologies are for the reasons explained earlier, there's also a reason for caution, and some of the recent experience, and certainly in U.S. development, support the need for caution in supporting or anticipating broad deployment of these types of reactors. Those are my comments, Mensan.
Thank you, Jonas. I think you saved us in terms of our time management. Appreciate it very much.
My pleasure.
So I think in this first panel, we examined the global development, the status overview, and the innovative features and some concerns, both economic and non-proliferation or security issues. And I think we'll move into right into the next panel, which is now how to take these concerns into consideration when we design the system. So our next three speakers will talk about how to address those issues in actual system implementation in terms of what I call 3S by design: safety, security, and safeguards. So we have another very excellent three speakers on the topic. So the first presentation will be given by Dr. Na-Young Lee. She's the Director General Office of Nuclear Security at KNOC, Korea Nuclear Non-Proliferation and Control. She's got PhD in nuclear engineering from Seoul National University 2001. She examined the issues of verification and validation for safety critical digital and INC system in a nuclear power plant. And she's using that expertise in examining the various innovative systems challenges in the nuclear power plant of the future. She joined KNOC in 2006 and worked on non-proliferation and security issues. And also she's in charge of regulations on safety, security, physical protection, and cybersecurity interface, and as well as export control. Let's welcome Dr. Na-Young Lee.
Thank you, Professor Yin. Okay. I'll try to share my presentation here.
We can see it, yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, and maybe good evening to everyone. My name is Na-Young Lee, and I'm working in KNOC. Title of this session is Technology Innovations of SMRs and Nuclear Security Non-Proliferation Implications. And I will focus more on security and safeguards implications of SMR. Since I'm working in KNOC, kind of regulatory body, my presentation would be a little bit that kind of perspectives of regulatory position. But however, my position would not represent the position of my organization. In this presentation, first I will explain why we need to consider safeguards and security in new advanced reactors, especially on small modular reactors. Then I will show you what would be the potential challenges need further consideration in terms of safeguards and security. Then I will summarize my talk. There are so many different types of reactors. We have second generation and third generation nuclear power plants. In the past, many research groups tried to develop new types of nuclear reactors. At the time, to avoid too much competition among different developers, they set criteria to evaluate new types of reactors. That was Gen 4 International Forum, so established in 2001. In this view graph, you can see some features that the new reactor should have: sustainability, economics, safety. and proliferation and physical protection. You already heard about sustainability, economics, and safety features of SMRs. In the previous session, also they already covered the safeguards and security, but most of people would agree on upper three parameters we need. However, even nuclear engineers like SMR developers sometimes ask, why do we need care about safeguards and security? It is because peaceful use of nuclear energy is based on agreement among states, so-called Non-Proliferation Treaty. Of course, there are some more conventions like Convention on Physical Protection of Nuclear Material and its amendment. And these multilateral regimes are backed up by bilateral agreement, and so on. So, we need to consider safeguards and security when we introduce new nuclear systems. So, first, our discussion safeguards issues. Already Dr. Suki and also Dr. Seeger mentioned about safeguard challenges, and I will start the general features first. Based on the NPT, IAEA, and each state, we conclude safeguards agreement. Basically, safeguards activities can be classified as this. So design information verification. So first, if any state wants to introduce nuclear facility, they should report information questionnaires to the IAEA. Based on the information, IAEA determines safeguards approach for the corresponding facility, the so-called facility attachment. And also they should verify design information before and after the nuclear power plant establishment. And also accountancy is the key parameter of the safeguards. For the continuity of knowledge, IAEA design, containment, and surveillance system and install it in the nuclear facility. And they verify it during the inspection. In this regard, Mr. Boyer of the IAEA compared LWR and SMR in view of safeguards. It is already 5 years ago, but the features would not change. So I will show you some features. Fueling, spent fuel removal, this kind of features would be different from LWR and SMR. So as you know, fueling would be different for LWR and SMR because sometimes in LWR case, they refuel it on site and it is 12 to 24 months. But SMR case, it might be off-site in rare cases. And also for the spent fuel, usually in LWR, spent fuel could be stored in on-site or shipped to the supplier and no removal. Reactor core is also difficult because for LWR case, we can access during refueling, but SMR case, if there's no refueling, then it's very difficult to access there. We call it difficult to access, and then we cannot verify, inspect reactor cores. This is the same for the continuity of knowledge. If we don't have refueling, it's very difficult. And also for the decommissioning, LWR case, it will happen in on-site, but SMR, we don't know. It might be shipped to the developer countries. So, in addition to the differences from the generic physical properties, we need more consideration on features affecting safeguardability. As you know, there are new non-water-cooled reactors and generally higher uranium concentration, maybe less than 5%, but sometimes over 5%. But these intrinsic features would affect safeguardability. For example, in case of a pebble-based type, accounting and nuclear material verification methods would be far different from those for the LWR types. To tackle these issues, IAEA already started working on developing safeguard approach with the member states. Here, member state does not include not only non-nuclear weapon states, but also nuclear weapon state. Other issue would be the fact that the developer of the system would be different from user. In case the supplier would be nuclear weapon state, and it might not consider detect safeguards features during the design stage. Or even though they consider safeguard features according to their standards, it would not match to the regulation accounting system of the host country. If this would not be considered in the earlier stage, some features would be very difficult to cover in the later stages. Therefore, consulting process among developers, host countries, and IAEA should take place in the earlier stage. In conclusion, safeguards would be different and difficult for some types of SMRs, but in general, it would not be a big problem when safeguards would be considered during the design stage. Now I'll move to nuclear security measures and challenges. When we establish nuclear security system for the nuclear facility, we should classify it in 3 stages. First, we need detection measures. Sensors, cameras, or guards will notice something or someone approach to the facility. Then we need to delay them until response force arrive. These would be analyzed based on the design-based threat of the country, and according to the results, we can implement proper security systems. These are general to all the nuclear facilities, and to satisfy the nuclear security objectives, we need to establish, maintain, and implement performance evaluation program, access authorization program, also cyber security program, and insider mitigation programs. In addition to these kind of features, we also need to consider how to coordinate implementation of security operation with the plant safety operations. Here I want to show you some nuclear security challenges for the SMRs. As I mentioned in the previous page, security requirements should be analyzed and reflected in the system design. But if the system would be developed and manufactured in the other country, then when can we consider site-specific features relevant to regulation, including design-based threat? Improved safety features SMR would be to consequence-based graded approach. So maybe they will reduce the number of steps, guards or something. But if it is located in the remote area, it cannot depend on the response forces outside. Then physical protection system should consider those facts into their design. Since SMRs would apply state-of-the-art technology, it can have more flexibility in establishing security system. But regulation would be prescriptive, so regulation should change and need to accept performance-based security systems. Again, here site-specific conditions should be considered. Design-based threat of the host country is important, and number of response force inside and outside should be considered, especially when the SMR is located in remote area. And also we should think about insider threat. Most people mention that in the SMR we can have just small number of steps, but in that case, if somebody would become insider, then he or she would be possibly super insider, maybe because there are small number of steps. And also cybersecurity would be carefully investigated. However, we do not know how far the SMR would adapt information technology and operational technology, and we don't know about the connectivity to the outside. But transportation would be a big problem. I will cover it in the next slide. Usually transportation issues, they don't really care about it, but I think it is very important because in the nuclear security, we have Convention Physical Protection of Nuclear Materials and its amendment. But according to that convention, category is classified by material type and amount, and it doesn't have any consideration on moving loaded reactors. Some SMRs would be fuel loaded and transported to another countries, but it doesn't care about it. The Nuclear Security Convention didn't think about that kind of conditions. But in point of safeguards, it would be very difficult because the nuclear power plant with fuel, and if it is moved to another by illicit trafficking or something, that it would be a big problem. But for safeguards, they don't consider terrorists. They consider only state actors. So it is not under the safeguards boundaries. So we need more discussion on transportation, and safeguards issue as well as security issues should be combined and then discussed. Okay, here in this presentation, I showed you 2 points: safeguards and security. For the safeguards, I reviewed the technical features of safeguards and differences of LWR and SMR, and to show and identify some features affecting safeguards. And maybe I can suggest closer consulting process among developer, host, and IA from the earlier development or manufacturing stage will be helpful. For security, we review the technical measures and programs of security and regulation reflecting SMR features. And we discussed challenges of security by design caused by undetermined siting, design-based threat. And also we should think about cybersecurity and transportation issues. And I could suggest that security requirements should be discussed earlier between developer and host. In conclusion, safeguards and security should be considered from the early design stage. Safeguards and security requirements should be developed and implemented during the design and implementation stage. Some issues are originated from the fact that manufacturer is different from host. Since the SMRs are not like traditional LWRs, it is a little bit similar to the commercial off-the-shelf. Commercial off-the-shelf means that it has already manufactured in the factory. It does care about the requirements of the user. So SMR should not be tailored to the user requirements. Therefore, we need a kind of discussion steps before then. Also, we need to clarify the role of manufacturer, because manufacturer do almost all the things. And in the manufacturer's roles, we should include the supply chain. Already Dr. Suzuki mentioned about supply chain, but it is not that kind of supply chain, because supply chain is important in cybersecurity, because some manufacturing features, as you know, in the newspaper, there are some backdoors of the items, but we cannot screen it if we cannot screen it during the manufacturing process, it would be a big problem after it's installed. So then I think we need internationally agreed regulatory framework for safety, safeguards, and also security. Because regulation cost would be high for the SMR. But as you know, SMR is known to economically viable. But some user countries, they don't have experience on using nuclear power plant, and they don't have real experience on regulation. Therefore, we should have some kind of agreed framework to help them. In that regards, IA already issued some consultancy meetings, and I think that kind of IA-centered consultancy meetings would be very helpful. Here, you already saw some Dr. Suzuki's presentation. He mentioned maybe 75 different SMR types, but even in Korea, I think there are so many different kinds of SMRs developed in our country. So there are so many different types of SMRs, and there is no one-size-fits-all. So I think it is very challenging to all the countries, for the host country and developer countries. So that's why I think this workshop would be very helpful to address these issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lee, again for your very comprehensive, critical presentation on the issue. As some of you may have noticed, these issues we're talking about is brand new. This is untrodden territory. The international community has not really seriously thought about these issues. So these are really issues that we have to, as we speak, examine and then really come up with some consensus for future development of SMRs. So with that, I think we have also some very thought-provoking presentations coming Our next speaker is Dr. Ferenc Danloki-Veres. Dr. Ferenc Danloki comes from Monterey, California, Center for Nonproliferation Studies. He's an adjunct professor at Middlebury Institute for International Studies at Monterey. He is a winner of Nobel Prize as a part of the team for neutrino observation collaboration. And he also is a laureate, along with his team, of the 2016 Breakthrough Prize in Physics. So as you can see, Dr. Danloki-Veres is a serious, hardcore scientist, but he examines the nexus issues, policy, international policy, international relations, and the implications of the technology in the real world situation. So I think he is an example of maybe some of you, especially those student NEREC fellows who are interested in pursuing a similar career as a hard scientist. I think it is a great opportunity for us to introduce Dr. Danloki-Veres, also a good friend of mine. He has a master's and PhD in high energy physics from Carleton University. He has just published a co-authored book titled Nuclear Choices for the 21st Century, a Citizen's Guide, published by MIT Press. Dr. Danloki-Veres, stage is yours.
Thank you very much. Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Okay, great. So thank you very much for, first of all, I want to say that I was on the team that won the Nobel Prize. I didn't actually win a Nobel Prize, just to be clear. So thank you very much for inviting me, and thanks for all the participants for sticking it out all these strange times of the day, wherever you're going to be. I'm really delighted to be part of this panel discussion this morning, and to see and hear so many friends participating in the conference. It's really great. I thank also all the previous speakers for really excellent presentations, and I hope it's okay if I will skip some slides related to what's already been discussed. And with regards to the previous speaker, Dr. Lee, I fully agree that we have to have an international standard for the 3 S's. I want to say that it's just before I start, it's not just about climate change. A while ago, I saw a great presentation by Amy Swikart from the Colorado School of Mines, who gave a webinar invited by the Gen 4 International Forum about energy poverty around the world. She showed a striking picture of how much, most of the sub-Saharan Africa has little lights at night. And we've seen this all before. You just have to go to Earth at night, type it in Google, and you'll go to the satellite image of the Earth at night. I've seen that before. I knew this, but that was truly striking, is that she overlaid this with the population of sub-Saharan Africa. And you realize how acute energy poverty is. So it's more than just climate change. It really affects everything. People use coal and firewood for indoor cooking and heating. And the estimates are that more than 3 billion people suffer from indoor air pollution. And I know how horrible, and this is in miniature because, not nearly as bad as it is in the developing world, but where I live, in California, we have a lot of wildfires, and it's been really quite horrible. But think of the effect this has on gender inequality and education across the world. So SMRs, and not just SMRs, but also other technologies and renewables and so on, could make a serious dent into this problem. As long as it's done right, taking safety, proliferation, resistance, and security into account. So I'm going to skip a little bit of my outline, but first some quick definitions: proliferation, resistance, and physical protection, which I want to discuss. I think these things should never be glossed over if SMRs are to have a future, if it's going to be accepted by populations. Then I'll look at some considerations and characteristics of SMRs from proliferation resistance perspective. I might skip some of this because we already discussed this. And I really want to focus on what I see as a strength of SMR deployment by isolating from population centers and people by locating it deep underground. Finally, I'll discuss monitoring SMRs using novel detectors known as anti-neutrino detectors. Full disclosure here, I'm a member of a collaboration called Watchman, which aims to build a 1 million liter detector 1 kilometer deep or 3,200 feet underground in the United Kingdom to detect the Hartlepool reactor, which is located 25 kilometers away, and that's for proliferation, studying proliferation purposes. All right, so applying the definition of PR to SMRs, an SMR is proliferation-resistant PR if its deployment and use on the scale and with the distribution envisaged by proponents would not significantly increase the probability of proliferation of nuclear weapons. The focus here is on the scale of what is envisioned in terms of the reactors themselves. PR also impedes the diversion or undeclared production of nuclear materials or misuse of technology by the host state seeking to acquire nuclear weapons or other nuclear explosive devices. And that focuses on the host. So it considers the full system life cycle, including all the aspects of the fuel cycle, both intrinsic factors, we already kind of discussed this, and extrinsic factors. And physical protection, which is distinct from this, is the characteristic of an SMR and associated fuel cycle that impedes the theft of materials suitable for nuclear explosives or RDD, radiological dispersal devices, and sabotage of facilities and transportation by non-state actors. But I want to emphasize, as they say in the Gen 4 working group, that the PR and the PP are distinct. All right. So I want to commend the previous speaker on really an excellent SMR booklet, which is produced by the IEA. It's a fantastic resource, but I would appreciate inclusion in the survey of an explanation of how security, safeguards, and proliferation resistance are being considered in particular in particular designs. But I do want to say it's really, commend IEA for making such a great booklet available, which really is a book. But it would be great to have PR specifically addressed in future booklets. I apologize for this. So it would be great to have PR specifically addressed in future booklets. So I just did a quick search in this. In a 354-page book on SMRs, only 15 SMRs out of 72 mentioned, maybe it was 75, sorry, actually mentioned PR. 2 mentions of the word safeguards and none of safeguards by design. So I really feel like it's important to also include that in this very important book. I never want PR and PP to be an afterthought. Because there's so many, as previous speakers have said, there's so many things that we have to think about when it comes to SMR deployment. So I don't want to go into too much detail here. I want to talk a little bit about material attractiveness of uranium for nuclear weapons. We've already discussed a bit of this. Of course, when you're talking about HALEU, it would be very impractical, almost impossible to use for a nuclear weapon, but a more relevant concern is that it can be enriched further. A general rule of thumb is that, and you may know this already, but general rule of thumb is that 20% HEU, you've already done 90% of the work of enriching to weapons grade, if you consider that's enriching from 0.7111%, which is natural uranium, to 90%. If you consider enrichment greater than 20%, I want to highlight the incredible effort and work around the world that there has been done in terms of HEU minimization. The international community has made significant progress during the last decades in converting HEU reactors from HEU to LEU use, LEU fuels. 33 countries and Taiwan have been cleared entirely of HEU, including 15 since the Obama administration, which was actually spearheaded by Ambassador Holgate, launched the Nuclear Security Summit process in 2010. More than 100 reactors have either been shut down or converted since the US reduced enrichment for research and test reactors program began. Nearly 7 tons of HEU have been removed from civilian use, and these efforts have strengthened the non-proliferation nuclear security regimes and decreased the threat from HEU misuse worldwide. None of the SMRs suggest using HEU, and I think that's really good news. Here, by the way, I'm showing a picture. I think this is of the Nigerian reactor. This was one of these amazing things where Chinese scientists, Nigerian scientists, and US scientists, we had a previous speaker from Argonne, have worked together to convert a miniature neutron source reactor in Nigeria. So that's really from HU to LEU. So that's really a great accomplishment. So here I want to consider the risk of dispersion of SMR technology, focusing on technology and the country it is sold to. My concern here is that selling technology to nuclear newcomers where there may be issues or history with state proliferation and or non-state actors. So questions of export of nuclear power technology should go beyond simple cost, but should also consider the PR risk of the country it is being sold to. Would the ROK or the United States governments be comfortable if SMR X would be sold or deployed to country Y from the point of view of non-proliferation physical protection? If no, then SMR should have to be tailored to be more appropriate for the threat level in that country. With this, I'm going to skip some of these. Well, I'll say the next slide here. The PR and PP acid test. This is courtesy of Matt Bunn. And by acid test, I mean a test that gives a certain result. Expansion of SMR technology to country Y is acceptable as long as it will not lead to nuclear weapon spread, use in RDD, or misuse of technology. We need to consider the PR and PP of the technology, but also where the technology is being exported to. We need to consider not only what the country says it will do, but also what it could be capable of doing, kind of a long-term trajectory. So about a decade ago, the Gen 4 initiative came up with the PR and PP methodology of how to evaluate the PR and PP for a particular nuclear design, say SMRs. It's a very well thought through methodology, but it's not required for it to be considered for new designs. And my concern is that purchasing an SMRs could potentially be a shortcut in the future for developing nuclear weapons. All right, I'm going to skip some of this because we've discussed some of this already, but I want to get straight to the next point here, which is discussing floating nuclear power plant, which has also been discussed, which is great. Floating nuclear power plants are particularly interesting from the point of view of newcomer countries where electricity can be delivered offshore without a need for the country. It's delivered to be involved in managing the NPP. So that's a real strength. And the previous speaker, Hadi Tsubki, already mentioned this, but the academic Limonov is primarily used for hydrocarbon extraction, which is kind of 2 steps forward and maybe 1 or 3 steps back, if you can think of it from that perspective. But I want to say that there are some interesting points. The model itself has addressed some of the PR and PP concerns. One, in terms of PR, is that it's all Russian staff. Russia remains the owner of the floating nuclear power plant. There's going to be periodic removal of the spent fuel and supply of fresh fuel. There's no need for the host country to be involved with spent fuel or fuel handling, and the use of LEU. So all these are kind of, positive things. In terms of physical protection concern, there's still the possibility of piracy and non-state actors concerns if it's going to be deployed to, say, Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines, or somewhere where there are, issues with non-state actors, then, it could be concerned. The security will be provided by the Russian armed guards, but there still, I would say, is a terrorism threat. It's necessary to focus on safeguards and material accountability of all sea-based NPP, and there's still many technical and legal issues that should be resolved. Here, I want to take 1 second and highlight the publication by Ms. Veronika Bedenko, who was my former student who spoke earlier in the conference from the Open Nuclear Network. She was a graduate of the McGimo Monterey dual degree program, and this work actually was her thesis. Students earn both a master's in nonproliferation and terrorism studies from the Middle East Institute and a master's in international affairs from the Moscow State Institute of International Relations, or McGimo, which is one of Russia's most prestigious and internationally respected educational institutions in the area. So this is kind of a shameless plug. If there are students listening that are interested in, potentially doing a dual degree, then please contact me and I will get you in touch with the right people. So I want to focus on isolation. Isolation as an aspect of SMRs can be and have some, can have some really, really positive aspects. So some reactors are already being considered to be deployed, below grade. This will make it more technically challenging to access the fissile material, greater PR and PP. However, an underground or a shallow buried hardened structure may also provide excellent protection against large explosives and aircraft impact, and be more resilient if it's done correctly against environmental and weather conditions. And for example, the atom reactor that Dr. Kim so nicely described, you might benefit from underground deployment. So I want to propose something which is building on the work of Wes Byers from Los Alamos and James Mahar from the Idaho State University, to propose to go deeper than just 10 meters, tens of meters, but to go even deeper to hundreds of meters. I worked at a neutrino science experiment in Canada located in a large cavity, which was 22 meters wide and 34 meters length, or 74 feet by 112 feet. So this was a very large cavity that was located 2 kilometers below the ground, or 6,500 feet. So drilling a large cavity a few hundred meters deep should not be particularly challenging. What would be the possible advantages of deploying SMRs deeper? Well, first, protect from multiple design-based threats, missiles, bombs, vehicle bombs, aircraft, etc., and protect it from the environment. Explosive shockwave attenuation. It's known that seismic waves are significantly dampened underground. So, for example, in 1976, miners in Tangshan, China, felt only minor vibrations during an earthquake, but when they surfaced, they found the city completely devastated. Of course, a more recent example is that a significant decrease in seismic motion was felt at an underground crude oil storage facility in Japan during the 2011 horrible Tohoku earthquake. So reactors deployed deep underground may be more appropriate for high earthquake regions. It might also, here I'm going on a limb a little bit, because this takes a lot of work to really sort this through, but it might simplify safeguards by operating as a perimeter portal monitor and improve what GIF calls safeguardability, the ease at which a system can be effectively put under international safeguards. When I talk about PPM, or perimeter portal monitor, I'm borrowing the concept from verification methods of nuclear treaties, where there's only a concern, tracking of what goes in and out of a certain perimeter portal. This is maybe appropriate for single batch cores, where cores that can be replaced after use and sent back to the factory. So it's simply just sending it underground and then taking it away. But also for multi-batch cores where the fuel handling would occur inside the perimeter portal monitor, the perimeter itself. This was actually first proposed by the late Larry Scheinman, who was at CNS, and Myron Kratzer, who passed away sadly earlier this year. Both experts in the field. The other positive advantage, possibly, is public acceptance. Because the reactor is deep underground, lower than the water table, there may be more acceptance. Plus, because it is underground, it may be able to be constructed near population centers. An actual LOCA occurred in 1969 at the Lucens reactor in Switzerland. It was a very serious accident, but there was no contamination to those on surface because it was deployed so deep underground. So there's many safety advantages as well, no need for containment, etc. And it may be, particularly acceptable for high-risk locations, not only earthquake, but also, in terms of the country itself, in terms of proliferation risk or non-state actors. For fun, I did a strawman estimate a little while ago of the cost to drill a cavity for a reactor at a depth of 100 meters. I assumed 2 shafts. One that's the shaft is, where you go deep underground, where you elevate what's called the cage goes underground. One with a 9-meter diameter, another one with a 4-meter diameter, a 10 by 10 meter hull, a 20 by 10 meter spent fuel storage area. It included horizontal and vertical excavation. The costs are going to be different. And I found that the cost was about $15 to $20 million. Now, if you're thinking about how expensive these projects tend to be, it might be something that could be, a little bit considered. Okay. I'm going to skip this next slide because I think we're running out of time. So finally, since we're also to talk about kind of future technologies for improving safeguardability of SMRs, I want to propose the idea of using anti-neutrino detectors to do near real-time estimate of the core fissile content, like the plutonium content, throughout the operating life of the reactor, and to confirm the operational on-off cycle and any thermal power excursions that might happen. No power information would actually be required from the operator to conduct the monitoring as long as the reactor is the detector is reasonably close to the reactor itself. So antineutrinos, many of you are probably familiar with this, are emitted from reactors to the tune of 10 to the 21 antineutrinos per second for a 300 megawatt thermal reactor. I hope I did that calculation right. But it can't be shielded, right? So you can't spoof that. There were, in the past, there have been detectors that have been deployed close to reactors. One of the first detections was from the San Onofre nuclear generating station, particularly focused on, the interest is in nuclear proliferation issues and seeing whether it could be used for safeguards. And that was 25 meters away from the reactor in what's called the tending galleries. The candidate detector we hope to construct will be several million liters of an antineutrino water target, so it will be much bigger than that. So according to Adam Bernstein, who's from the Livermore National Labs, one of my collaborators, such a detector would require about, let's say, 10 to 20 cubic meters of space, would have to be relatively near to the reactor, because we're talking about SMRs here. But the advantage is it doesn't require any access to the reactor. So it could be in a separate shaft, or it could be on surface. But then you'd have to have a larger detector because everything falls off of 1 over r squared. It's really notoriously difficult to catch antineutrinos. So that's why you need to have very large targets. The equipment cost depends on how close to the reactor you would be, but it would be below about $1 million. That's if you're pretty close to the reactor. So it's something to consider for safeguards possibilities for SMRs. So this is just conclusion. PRMPP should pass the acid test. Would you trust the USA or ROK to sell a type X SMR to country Y, both from the point of view of non-proliferation terrorism now and into the near future? The threat is real. I want to say about all of this. Technology sharing has led to proliferation. I didn't really go into the details of the cases. And we know that Al-Qaeda and ISIS was interested in nuclear materials. PRMPP must be taken seriously for public acceptance, which I think is required for the business to be sustainable in the future. So SMRs have a lot of potential, but safeguards and security by design need to be considered from the beginning. I think options such as siting deep underground may offer certain advantages. I think it's useful to consider that in the futures, and antineutrinos may also allow SMRs to be remotely monitored. I think I will leave it there.
Okay, thank you, Ferenc, for this very interesting, comprehensive presentation. So we'll look forward to revisiting some of the issues through Q&A. So let me introduce our last speaker, Dr. Adam Williams, coming from Sandia National Laboratory in USA. Dr. Adam Williams is a principal R&D systems engineer in the Center for Global Security and Cooperation. He serves as a principal investigator for many nuclear security projects for National Nuclear Security Administration and Department of State. He is also a systems theoretic analyst expert, supporting projects in managing complex risk, system dynamics, physical protection, system development and analysis, and global engagement. Let's welcome Dr. Adam Williams.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon to wherever you happen to be here in this wonderful world. For me, it is about 10 o'clock at night, so if I will try to suppress any yawns that I may have. I would like, as many of my previous speakers have mentioned, I would like to thank my fellow panelists for doing a tremendous job of introducing many of the challenges that face this world with growing interest in small modular reactors. What I hope to do in my few minutes here is to provide some additional thoughts to bring some of those concepts to perhaps some more of a tangible point, maybe with some clearer language. So effectively, what I'm going to speak on for the next few minutes is some internal an internal study that Sandia funded to look at many of the challenges that my fellow panelists have already spoken about. So as shown here on my title slide, the focus here is going to be more on what, quote, by design approaches or concepts might mean and what that might look like when we think about secure, safe, and safeguarded operations of small modular reactors. And so again, I will not belabor this particular point since particularly the previous two speakers did such a fantastic job of setting the stage. But in my background as a complex systems engineer, I'm fairly fascinated with this by design concept. And I use air quotes because the by design phrase is very popular and it's very important, but it's very consistent to the calls that Dr. Young had at the end of her presentation that said we should be thinking about security and safeguards earlier in the development process of these reactors, which was nearly mimicked by the previous speaker in discussing the importance of seriously considering proliferation resistance and physical protection throughout the operational life cycle, as well as the logistics and supply chains for small modular reactors. What I wanted to kind of highlight on this slide is similar to the other speakers. Although these by design concepts are being discussed, there are some practical and tangible obstacles to their implementation. Some of those obstacles rely on some of the legacy concepts and the traditional manner in which safety, security, and safeguards are conducted at the traditional set of nuclear power plants around the world, which, as was introduced at the beginning of today's discussion, are very large and a majority light water reactor-based technologies. And some of those underlying assumptions that have supported the evolution of safety, security, and safeguard mitigations for large nuclear power plants probably should be revisited as we are talking about small modular reactors, both in terms of the technical differences, the size differences, and the potential deployed environment differences. And then the flip side of that particular argument is, and again, this was introduced by both Dr. Young and the previous speaker, is the need to further develop robust regulatory systems to support what safety, security, and safeguards might look like for these small modular reactors. So for the next few slides, what I want to introduce a little bit of background. So as part of this internal study, we created a hypothetical light water reactor-based small modular reactor. We, at the time we conducted this study, I believe it was 3 years ago, we took some open source data and open source information on different SMR designs. We blended it all together and came up with something that was that we felt was fairly representative. What we then did is I got together a team of safety experts, security experts, and safeguards experts, and I asked them to do analysis in their specific realm of expertise on this hypothetical design. So for example, for our safety technical evaluation, we evaluated 4 different scenarios that ostensibly wanted to look at how this SMR design reacted under station blackout conditions. We used a series of different analytical software tools to complete this evaluation, and we came up with a few key takeaways which are listed here on the slide. The primary takeaways are that at least from this this fairly simple technical evaluation of a hypothetical SMR design, the statements of the benefit of inherent and passive safety systems were borne out in our evaluation. However, we also saw some opportunities to potentially leverage some of those safety enhancements in security and safeguards domains, particularly the last bullet there, which described across our 4 scenarios, there was fairly slow accident progression once the station blackout conditions started to impact reactor operations, which may provide some additional benefits when we think about ensuring that we can get the right kind of security response to the facility in time. In parallel, we conducted an international safeguards technical evaluation. The goal for this evaluation was to investigate the safeguardability of this hypothetical reactor and facility design against different attempted diversion scenarios. We used an evaluation tool called PRCalc, which allowed us to modify and create different scenarios that we were then able to compare the results of how easy or how often, or let me rephrase that, we were able to compare the effectiveness of different intrinsic and extrinsic barriers to diversion pathways. And what we found, again, which really just supports many of the statements that were already made, is that the current safeguards regime, by and large, can be effective, particularly against light water reactor-based technologies. However, given some of the novel technical options that are coming down the pipeline, given some of the deployment questions and more deployment flexibility, particularly described in the last presentation, additional safeguards will continue. Additional safeguards advancements, both in technologies and in processes, will only enhance the ability to help support non-proliferation through effective safeguards. One of the other challenges that we identified in this technical evaluation is that while safeguards for an individual SMR facility might be fairly straightforward, if many of these facilities are built and deployed around the globe, that might, in total, together, that might stress or stretch the current safeguard regime, which could lead to a need for advanced thinking for how we can ease the safeguards burden moving forward. And then lastly, for the security evaluation, we evaluated, again, a series of scenarios. In this analysis, we used fairly straightforward physical protection evaluation methodologies consistent with IAEA international best practices. We varied the sophistication of the security system at the facility. We varied the sophistication of the adversary force looking to complete some malicious act against this facility. And we ran different path analyses to compare the outcomes. And by and large, again, the traditional manner of addressing security concerns can be made to work for small modular reactors. However, as my previous colleagues have spoken, there are some additional nuances to expected SMR deployment and behaviors that should be addressed and might and could be and would support some advanced thinking in how we develop and design security systems for SMRs. One of the large goals of this technical evaluation was not only to look at security, safety, and international safeguards individually, but also to take a step back and say, if we think about each of these aspects in a by design perspective, are there benefits? Is it even possible to think of a 3S by design approach, where as technical experts begin to answer questions that help improve the safety performance of our system, can we identify any points where those mitigations, those systems, can either be leveraged to enhance security or safeguards, or maybe come into conflict with safety and security and safeguards. And so on this slide, I have a few examples of what we found from our fairly straightforward and simple technical evaluation of our hypothetical facility. But if we think about, I'll go ahead and speak to the first row for just a moment. If we think through the advertised passive and inherent safety systems in many of these SMR designs, as was introduced and described very well by our colleague from the IAEA, Mr. Subki. Passive safety systems clearly provide an operational benefit for enhanced safety. However, passive safety systems both provide an enhancement to security and potentially a challenge to security. Passive safety systems can help enhance our safety performance, but for example, if you have a hypothetical or a notional small modular reactor facility where the reactor itself is built underground, as was suggested by our previous speaker, but the passive safety systems are above ground, you haven't necessarily eliminated the security risk, you might have just shifted it around. And so looking at SMR design, development, and deployment from a 3S by design perspective really allows the design process, a true tried and true systems engineering design process, to come into play to help find those leverage points where we can increase efficiency and the economic viability of these plants, and minimize the points where safety mitigations, security mitigations, and safeguards mitigations might come into conflict. And so just to summarize, my conclusions do not differ much from the previous august speakers on this panel. By and large, this preliminary technical evaluation supports many of the safety, security, and safeguards claims for SMRs. Our results support calls for by design approaches where we move thinking on security, safety, and safeguards earlier into the design process. So, again, to quote the previous speaker, so that these elements are thought of at the beginning of reactor development, not as an afterthought. Many of these interdependencies can be identified and can be designed as points of leverage and to increase efficiency. To increase efficiency and effectiveness of operations. And as, and similar to claims and conclusions from the previous speakers, in support of moving toward kind of a globally accepted framework for what 3S looks like, this technical evaluation supports the idea that an integrated 3S framework can provide some benefit when we think about designing civilian nuclear reactors to meet future needs against future challenges. And so with that, I will end my talk and I look forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Williams, for keeping the time on track and also addressing this issue very eloquently. I think his talk really highlights the needs for 3S by design to better characterize and evaluate and manage the increasing risk complexity of SMR design. So I'm sure we'll have a little more discussions on those issues. So again, I would like to thank all the speakers in the panel and truly appreciate your participating in this morning, in this evening, or this afternoon. So I think before we have this Q&A session opening up to the audience, I would like to ask some of the speakers in the session to think about the theme that we covered. I think pretty much everybody indicates the need for harmonization of global effort, need for a new regulatory framework, a new licensing pathway. I think the question is, how? As I mentioned, as some of you already mentioned, this is untrodden territory. No one has gone through this path. And global community is working individually, as Dr. Kim or Dr. Suki noted. There are many independent developers. And right now, many countries are not ready even to review the licensing applications of these technologies. So how can we coordinate these efforts and how can we harmonize this effort to really address some of the key challenges posed by the SMRs? So let me first go to Dr. Suki from IAEA. Could you address some of those questions from IAEA's perspectives?
Thank you, that person. First of all, that I learned a lot from all the distinguished presenters and Dr. Williams, Dr. Danoke Veres, Dr. Lee, and then Dr. Kim. And then I think that the chairpersons summarized quite well is to the issues of this. The last presentation is very interesting that now SMR is all bound to by design concept. Security by design, safeguard by design, safety by design, economic by design. But right now the issue is that not only global harmonization, even when we see in the national level or regional level, and then state will have the burden of optimizing different stakeholders' view. For example, what is the technology developer? I come from the technology developer community, and then have the view of the reliable by design, safety by design, economic by design. Technology developers rarely even touch in the beginning of the design the aspect of the safeguardability and proliferation resistance. Yes, and then I take the very important suggestion from the Dr. Danoke Veres. I'm the coordinator of the booklet production in the past 10 years. The issue of not including it is from the IEA side, it's very important to address proliferation resistant characteristic safeguarded by design from the beginning. But due to the production time of the booklet, it takes time for us to gain feedback from technology developers to speak or to write on that subject. So it will take long. So the availability, the preparedness of technology developers on speaking of that subject is limited. You can see in all the presentation, you name it, the technology developers, the vendors in US, the vendors in Europe, or in Japan and Korea, they are now addressing on how they come up with the good licensing pathway to get their design licensed for their first customer. So then they put that the proliferation resistant in the state. So right now is that to address the concern from the chairman. There will be again that the state, the capacity building to the state, very important on how to harmonize, to optimize what I was saying, to optimize the different angle of how technology developers, utilities, and regulator see the aspect of proliferation resistant by design, the safeguard by design, and security by design to what's called SMR project. I just want to highlight one thing. In Southeast Asia, the area that I came from, that I left 27 years ago, 10 countries, including mentioned Indonesia, Malaysia, the Philippines, Singapore, Thailand, Brunei, Darussalam, and so forth, it came up to installed capacity of 170 gigawatt electric. So they are not junior operator of power plant. So 170 gigawatt is very huge, and then it could be supplied by nuclear how many units. So they are familiar, but they don't want. The issue right now is that would the aspect of the proliferation resistant safeguard, very important, critical as they are, would deter or encourage embarking countries to adopt nuclear power plant. I think I would stop on that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I want to ask Dr. Franz Danoke Veres on the similar issue, but you represent on this panel a think tank community or non-proliferation community like CNS. From your perspective or your organization's perspective, how can the PR community or non-CNS communities, non-profession community or think tank community can work together with organizations like IEA, EA, or developers or even nations, regulatory bodies in supporting these activities? Can you make some comment on that?
Sure. I think one thing I just want to highlight is a very important report that WINS has written, the World Institute of Nuclear Security, which is security of advanced reactors. And they're particularly, I think it's not really so much focused on safeguards, more on security. And they're particularly looking at, this was a report written, I think, last year, but it's very easy to find in Google, so security of advanced reactors. And they have, I think they have 5 recommendations. I don't have them all on the top of my head, I'm sorry, about exactly dealing with the issue of trying to move forward. And one of the things that they highlight also is to have many, many stakeholders, many different, you know, whether it's NGOs or whoever, be involved in the process and the you know, as we already said, quote, by design, have that start from the beginnings, have that part of have the developers and the designers be part of the whole discussion from the beginning. I think that's one of the main points I want to say. Also, what they also, if I remember correctly, what they really want to state is that what they did is they kind of surveyed designers or developers of SMRs all over the world, particularly focused on what would they need to have to move forward with security, security by design, and so on. And like I said, they came up with this big report, and I can't remember all the details, but I think it's probably useful to look at that report because they have some very good recommendations on how to move forward. I think I really want to emphasize how important it is of having NGOs or the policy community always be involved. You know, I'm a scientist by nature, but you know, a lot of us aren't. But that doesn't mean that they don't know stuff, right? It's very important to keep them involved and have them be in tune, work with the developers and the designers with reactors. And you know, I think many of us would really encourage that and welcome that. Any input that we could provide.
Okay, thank you. Next, I want to go to Dr. Lee, Nayoung Lee. Dr. Lee is actually a very ardent supporter of NEREC and has been very closely cooperating with us to supporting our educational research activities. But she also represents a regulatory body of Korea. So, Dr. Lee, from your perspective, I know you have issues with safety security interface in Korean regulatory system, and that is also an important issue. And many other countries also addressing the same issue. So, from your perspectives, how can this issue be addressed in a national frame or in international framework? And what is your suggestion?
Okay. In fact, when you suggested this workshop, I thought about what would be really helpful for the developer, designer of the SMRs, and also for the user countries, because sometimes I have some questions from countries that what we should prepare, and designers don't know what kind of thing they should do during the design phase. So I thought about it, and I can think of one solution, not real solution, but I can suggest there. Maybe some of you know about INPRO. INPRO, whenever you introduce new nuclear system, they should check whether they are correspond to this one. This one is very easy and very doable. So maybe we can develop that kind of checklist for the designer and also for the user country. It would be different. And if you do that, then that will be very helpful. So if I want to introduce nuclear system, then what should I do? They have their kind of cuts, but they should be tailored to my needs. Then what should I do? Then I am a non-nuclear weapon state, and I should think about safeguards. For the safeguards, do they provide design information and what kind of floor plan or some other perspectives they should prepare? But as you know, safeguards is another national regulation. It is IAEA should provide. That's why we should discuss with IAEA, but usually developer discuss with IAEA, but host countries, they should involve during the process. That's why I should suggest that kind of checklist should specify what time they should engaged in that kind of process. If we provide that kind of system, that will be very helpful for them, and also for the designer of the SMRs, they should know what kind of features they should prepare in the future. I mean, during the design is okay, But if this SMR would be located in the very remote area, then maybe there would be no outside response force. Then what kind of features we should add more on our SMR? And also, what would be their design-based threat? Because some areas would be okay. I would say in Korea, I think it's okay. In some small island in the Pacific region, it's okay. But Middle East or some other countries, they have a very high level of threat. Then they should have a very high design-based threat. That kind of criteria, they should have that kind of conversation beforehand. So they should install and establish some kind of that things in their system. And I think that kind of things can be made like checklist type kind of suggestion or something. Then they can see and they can check and they can do it. I think that would be helpful. Yeah, that's my suggestion.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Lee. I want to go next to Professor Kim. You heard all this. You as a hardcore nuclear engineer, you design things. After listening to all these discussions, any thoughts in your mind in terms of how the system should be designed and developed? You're muted, Professor Kim. Yes.
So you were asking me, right?
Yes. Now we can hear you.
Okay. Well, actually, I'm sort of a novice in this area, so just security, safeguard, and non-proliferation. But I feel like we have to think about this a lot more when developing new nuclear technologies. By the way, so why are we or are they developing SMRs? My understanding is this. That is to make nuclear more attractive. But here comes the very big dilemma. So in all countries, including Korea, we are requested to be safer, to be more affordable or cheaper. And nowadays, we are strongly requested to be more flexible. So using the SMR, I hope, probably we can meet those kind of requirements or requests. But today, we all, say it should be more or similarly proliferation resistance, and the 3S design should be taken into account at the development stage, and then maybe pretty much big stress, and possibly depending on the reactor design types, it's going to be a lot more difficult. And personally, I think when it comes to the water-cooled based SMR, there may be no big difference regarding the 3S between SMR and the conventional big size LWS. However, for other type of reactors, particularly for example, sodium-cooled fast reactors and liquid metal reactors, there may be huge difference and huge challenges. So in that regard, but it's interesting, we have already many startups very seriously developing, very seriously working on the technologies. But unfortunately, I should say, they are not thinking about the security, safeguard, and non-proliferation very much serious. So in this regard, I think the IAEA, as the international so-called leading agency, should provide sort of standard, as Dr. Nam mentioned, regarding the requested or necessary provisions or measures for the coming new technologies for global deployments. That's what I can say or comment now.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Kim. And lastly, and not least, I would like to go to Dr. Williams. I can see that you play a role of sort of independent evaluator. You examine the system in terms of safety, security, safeguards. As far as I know, not many people or organizations have done that. Your work is one of the first real in-depth analysis of all those issues. So you'll be maybe much sought after person organization. What is your wish? How can you really make a contribution through your work to the global community?
I appreciate the very kind words. What would be my wish? I'm going to think about answering that question and offer a few thoughts on some of the comments that my colleagues have made. So to the point that Dr. Lee spoke of in terms of suggesting creating this checklist to help guide designs, the IAEA has a very useful document called the Milestones document, which lays out 19 steps, right, that countries need to do for just developing a nuclear program kind of at the large level. So it seems to me that Dr. Lee is suggesting potentially looking to create a similar milestones document for SMR development, which might have a slightly different flavor to it because you're now introducing perhaps more questions on technical effectiveness and feasibility for those different countries. And actually, I'll use that as a springboard to answer the question that was posed to me. What do I hope my work or the work that I helped lead, right? I led a wonderful team of people on that report. I would hope that our work helps support moving this conversation forward so we can provide some of the underlying logical thought structures, models, frameworks, and processes to support global harmonization towards these questions. My guess is that those of us participating on this panel for this event support the development of SMRs for all of the wonderful benefits that they can bring to global and regional society. And for us to have a little bit of positive enhancement to bringing that to fruition is seemingly part of what drives us to do our work each and every day. And so the hope for our research that we continue to do and that I'm very interested in personally as a complex systems engineer is how can we develop new models, new mental frameworks and decision-making structures that allow these complex problems, right? Developing an SMR is a complex challenge. Developing the reactor part is actually the easiest part. Figuring out how that reactor fits into the associated facility and how that facility fits into its operating environment is much more challenging. And to meet these flexibility, these calls for increased flexibility, understanding those interactions are going to be more important than building a giant, traditionally sized nuclear power plant that sits in one spot for 40 to 80 years. So that's my unfortunately long-winded answer to your question. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. I think we're missing Mr. Segal. I wish I could ask him some more questions, but maybe he's not available. So at this point, I would like to open it up, open the discussion to the floor or any audience. If anybody has a question to the panel, please raise your hand and just speak up.
Thank you. My name is Yoon-ki Lee. I'm an undergraduate student at Hanyang University studying international relations, and I have a question for Dr. Williams from panel 2. So a 2013 publication of the Union of Concerned Scientists contended that the inherent safety features of SMR reactors are untested, and the lower capital investment required for SMR construction has also been called into question by the Institute for Energy and Environmental Research, which contends that construction of a modular nuclear plant would require costly early construction of shared facilities, such as a containment structure intended for use with all plant reactor modules. So how do you think the cost can be reduced without compromising safety and security in the long term? Thank you.
That's a great question. And again, to kind of mimic what our colleague Jonas mentioned, my responses to these questions are going to be those, right, my personal thoughts and in no way reflect anybody that I work for or I'm affiliated with. To answer that very well stated question, I would simply say one of the challenges, and again, this was identified by one of our previous speakers, one of the challenges in understanding the true economic costs of these facilities is that they haven't been built yet. So most of these economic projections are estimates, and the boundary at where you stop including costs may not be consistent between report A, report B, and report C. So for what it's worth, right, any cost estimate should be taken with a grain of salt. To address the question of how could we possibly bring down the overall costs, I truly believe that bringing discussions on how to meet safety requirements, how to meet security requirements, how to meet international safeguards obligations early into the design phase is the clearest way to reduce capital costs. There are a handful of studies in the complex systems engineering literature that describe the economic benefit in terms of percentages of cost saved, but the overall engineering rule of thumb is it's easier to design away a problem than to retrofit a solution to a problem that you've built. And so the more thinking that can be done up front, which again, I think mimics many of my colleagues on this panel, the more you can address those problems up front, the more economic that facility can be over its lifetime. I hope that was a sufficient answer.
Okay, thank you. Any other question? Yes.
Yes.
Kayla.
Yes. Hello, my name is Kayla Orta, and thank you so much for a very interesting panel. My background is in political science, so this is very new to me, but definitely enjoyed following along. A few of us had a question related to the anti-neutrinos monitoring, so this is a question directed toward Dr. Dolnoki Veras in particular. So I understand when you talk about the anti-neutrino monitoring, you had described instituting a rod or an item into the ground to be able to monitor specifically for underground SMRs. And you had mentioned that it would be approximately below $1 million to design something like this that could be outside. And we are talking about SMRs, and we're talking about particularly like micro SMRs and maybe not in the form of underground management. So I'm kind of curious, is there a way to use this technology for other types of SMRs that wouldn't be underground and potentially very portable? Thank you.
Great. So that's a great question. Actually, that's actually more what people are thinking about in terms of deploying these detectors for monitoring reactors for safeguards. It's really above ground, but there's a really strong advantage for deploying the detectors underground. And the reason is, I don't want to get too technical, but the reason is because all the detectors actually are underground currently. And the reason they're underground is to shield out cosmic rays, which kind of ruin your signal. So actually you really want to go underground. So that's why if you couple this, deploying reactors underground with actually having detectors underground, it's kind of a nice synergy between the two. But actually what people are looking at now in terms of safeguards is more having these small detectors close by to reactor core, maybe outside the the main perimeter, but pretty close by, and that would be on surface. And so then they have other ways of dealing the problem of cosmic rays and things like that. But that's one of the things. Thanks for the question.
And another question from Mandu.
Hello. Hello, my name is Mando Santos. I got into nuclear through studying medical isotopes at UC Irvine. And so thank you very much for your presentation. It's been very, very interesting. My question is for Dr. Young-hee Kim. I was just wondering, with implementation of AI and online fuel management, will SMR technology be protected against possibility of cyber attacks? Thank you very much.
Sorry, was that?
That's the biggest question I usually have when I present them about the autonomous SMRs. So first of all, I have to say, at the moment, the autonomous SMR may not be licensable because of the concern about the possible cyber attacks and its impact on the safety and security. But I believe in a sense, if we somehow, design and deploy those kind of autonomous SMR, well, actually the deeply underground SMR should be autonomous, I believe, then probably it can be safer and also probably more safer in terms of the security. Because, first of all, when we say we have autonomous, that means it should be extremely reliable at all. Even though we didn't reach that goal yet, but again, assuming we have achieved those kind of goals, then I believe it can be safer than operated by the human beings. So at the moment, that is the best answer I can give you. But again, we need a lot of work for those kind of achievement and the goals. But I have to mention this: when try to make the SMR affordable, more attractive, sort of automation and hopefully autonomous operation is necessary condition. Otherwise, it cannot be economic. Think about the cost of the personnel and other, So it's really challenging and interesting goals and activities. So thank you.
If I may add, I think use of AI technology is also being implemented in existing nuclear power plants designs. So I think for SMR as well as the current fleet of nuclear power plant is going to take advantage of the emergence of AI technologies. Any other question? This is the last session. Well, in fact, we have reached the limit of our session. So I think we should end the session. At this point, I would like to really appreciate all the participants, panel, speakers, discussants for their great contribution, especially addressing this very difficult topic. So truly, truly, we appreciate your effort, especially Dr. Suki. Despite the huge challenge presented by the time difference, you came with us and then stayed with us. So truly appreciate it. So let's thank all of our speakers for their great work for the panel session. And that concludes our session number 5 on SMR development. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I think the next in the program of the conference is closing remarks. The closing remark was originally going to be delivered by our Director General of Ministry of Foreign Affairs. But then another unfortunate development is, as we speak, our Director General for Ministry of Foreign Affairs on nuclear issues, non-proliferation issues, is on a plane. He is currently on a plane, literally, to go to the United States to attend some bilateral meetings. So on behalf of the MOFA's Director General, I will deliver a closing remark. Nuclear weapons present the greatest threat to human race on this planet. Nuclear power is again emerging as an important source of energy as part of low carbon energy portfolio for sustainable future development. The irony is that the same energy coming from an atom can be used for both. As the use of nuclear power continues, the potential risk of nuclear proliferation exists. So to reap the benefit of nuclear energy, we must remain vigilant in guarding the development and use of this technology. NEREC, the organizer of this conference, has three main focus. We address the connection between nuclear power and nuclear proliferation, both from global and regional perspectives. We examine the nexus between technology and policy, as KAIST is a premier institution in science and technology development. We raised the next generation leaders, like the participants on site here in this conference. Next generation leaders in nuclear non-proliferation to guard the continuing development of this technology. Through the NEREC conference over the last 3 days, we tried to cover all three of this. In session 1, we examined the status of global nuclear power development and possible concerns of nuclear proliferation. In general, the session indicated no major immediate concern with current development. The global community have found ways for nuclear power plants to be a stable way of generating electricity. Countries don't want to lose the prosperity benefit of nuclear power by attempting nuclear proliferation, thus experiencing ensuing sanctions and economic difficulties. And hopefully that remains the same in our future development. At the same time, there is no guarantee that the past will repeat in the future. The new wave of nuclear power development, as noted in this session or in our discussions the past 3 days, especially carried by the aspiring nuclear power states, may bring in new challenges. New challenges in nuclear security, in safeguards, and the interface. In that regard, IAEA's INPRO effort should be widely shared, supported, and further developed through the participation of international community representing various sectors. Perhaps a set of new toolkits may be needed, as also noted in that session, to guide the behaviors of suppliers and importers. In the session on North Korea, we examined the question of can North Korea have nuclear energy? In principle, there is no reason why North Korea cannot have nuclear energy. That was a consensus from legal and the principal perspectives. But the devils are in the details. The session noted from previous experience of Kido project that there are difficulties. Difficulty in DPRK's cooperation or non-cooperation in the project, in terms of non-proliferation obligations, following through non-proliferation obligations, readiness to receive the light water reactor project. There were also difficulties in securing the consistent support from the Kido executive board members. But the foremost difficulty we noted is lack of trust among the parties, in particular between United States and North Korea. So the future really depends on how trust can be built among the parties, especially, again, between the United States and North Korea. You know, when I gave a lecture to our NEREC fellows during last several weeks, we talked about the issue of trust. When you have no trust, how to build trust again. when the trust is low, the first thing, or if there is no trust, the first thing you have to do is to defy the stereotype. You have to demonstrate a new behavior. United States perhaps should stop demonizing North Korea. North Korea must demonstrate the behavior of a responsible, normal state to be recognized as a legitimate player. This session also noted the possibility of techno-diplomatic approach. This includes the idea of Northeast Asia common market approach as a way for North Korea to be engaged, included in the global value chain. It is a market-based approach, a strategy, through establishing multilateral economic development zone, thus promoting, enabling large joint ventures, including the development of nuclear power plant in North Korea, which will significantly reduce the risk associated with the project. The session also noted the need for the United States to have long-term security interest in North Korea, which could become also important turning point in the dialogue. I think example of that is joint development of rare earth elements in North Korea. The session we had today on SMR development noted significant innovative features of SMRs and also some of the significant challenges associated with. We already discussed in this session that we need a harmonious global development for this SMR technology to become a commodity that can be shared by the global community. We need a standardized regulatory framework, a licensing framework, pathways, so that many issues, challenges can be effectively addressed by all the parties, stakeholders involved. There is a need to better address safety and security issues, especially during transport. There is a need to address the issue of better security, but being in a remote, maybe isolated location, vulnerable to terrorist attack. There are many different SMR designs, so no one size fits all. Another major challenge that will have to be addressed through regulatory safety reviews and security safeguard reviews. The idea of underground deployment is interesting, and the possibility of remote monitoring also should be seriously examined. In this year's NEREC conference, we, for the first time, introduced the young generation session. We had 2 young generation sessions, one on global issues, one on Korean Peninsula issues. We gave them the harder task of examining the current global nuclear non-proliferation challenge and what is the path forward for DPRK denuclearization. Guess what? It was a huge success. They have done a great job in really addressing the issues and providing some creative and thought-provoking ideas. So I really am very happy and glad and applaud all the participants in the session, and also some of the senior members participating in the session as a discussant or the keynote speakers. Through this session, we want to really encourage young generation, in particular former NEREC fellows and affiliates, to think through the harder nuclear non-proliferation challenges and also think about the future, what they can do, how can they contribute as a member of the global community. In this year's conference, we noted that they have responded very well, and we expect great things coming from participants as well as all the NEREC alumni, fellows, community, to continue their journey to become a global contributor through their professional development. As we already mentioned and noted, nuclear power will remain an important energy source. That means there are a lot of work to be done in the future. The issue of managing nuclear technology, managing risk associated nuclear technology is going to be with us forever, along with the issues of nuclear waste management and all the potential health impact associated with the materials. So we need to remain vigilant in keeping the technology to really remain safe and responsible. The insights and questions raised and shared in this conference will be further developed, examined, and disseminated for the global community for better future of our planet. The challenge of North Korea will remain with us, but I'm an optimist, and with continuous patient effort by the global community, I hope and believe that North Korea's nuclear challenge will end with a happy ending story. Let's keep that hope and let's keep working together. And I hope to see you again in our next year's NEREC conference. Thank you. And before I truly close, I would like to recognize some of the people or organizations who made this conference a possibility. First of all, I'd like to recognize all the sponsors of our conference: Ministry of Foreign Affairs of South Korea, Korea's National Research Foundation under Ministry of Science and Technology, and Korea Hydro and Nuclear Power Company, the Stanton Foundation of Cambridge, United States, Korea Nuclear International Cooperation Foundation, and Asia Pacific Leadership Network. We truly, truly appreciate your support to make this happen, as well as our NEREC summer program possible during this very difficult time. Without their support, all these things would not be possible. I also would like to recognize some of the people who made this event possible. While some of you are enjoying this conference, there are a number of people working hard behind the scenes. First of all, the Streaming Korea there's a company responsible for running the show behind the scenes. They have done the same work for us last year and then again this year, and everything went smoothly, flawlessly. So really appreciate your effort for the last 3 days. Thank you, Streaming Korea. We have rapporteurs who have been working diligently for the last 3 days to basically summarize the speakers' discussions, the talks, so that we can really disseminate the contents. Dorothea from Hungary, Leila from Algeria, Kayla from United States, Yoongi from South Korea, Taiba from Pakistan, Sophia from Italy, Minju Kim from South Korea, Gregory from Israel, Mando from United States, Bridget from United States, and Roxana from Germany. These are the participants of our 2021 Summer Fellows Program. We truly appreciate your efforts for the last 3 days. And your work is not finished until you submit the report. Again, thank you. And also, I would like to recognize Ms. Yuna Choi, the program manager of NEREC, who really worked very diligently for the last 3 days or last several weeks to make this possible. And also Ms. Jiun Choi, program officer of NEREC, who run the program financially, administratively. So we really appreciate all your effort. And also we have 2 very capable interns supported all this, Jaewon Jung from Yonsei University, and also Cherin Kim from KAIST. Really appreciate all your effort and work, many sleepless nights for the last several weeks. Thank you so much. With that, I truly appreciate all your support, and let's conclude the conference. Thank you.